integral security. In this panel, we'll hear from experts on disarmament issues who will present concrete solutions to act for peace at different levels: international, at the level of our communities and churches, and at the individual level. We will first hear from our speakers and will then receive your questions during the question and answer session. Welcome to all of our speakers, and I remind you to quickly, please keep your remarks under the allotted time limit. First speaker, Dr. Pierce Cordon. Dr. Cordon serves as a disarmament advisor to the Holy See Mission to the United Nations in New York City. He has also previously worked for the US government, in particular supporting the negotiation and implementation of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Dr. Cordon will speak about current obstacles to global arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation, and ways in which the SCRAP project proposals can help to address these. Dr. Cordon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Our distinguished eminences and all others that are tuned in to this important webinar. I'm going to address armament, and this comes at a point where the United Nations has just celebrated its 75th anniversary. It was established in the ashes of the world's worst war. It provides for a structure of global governance in which resort to force to the extent necessary is carried out by the organization. It envisages that nations no longer rely on arms for security. The Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons has just celebrated its 50th anniversary. It requires that its 191 parties seek to achieve nuclear disarmament pursuant to a treaty on general and complete disarmament. The SCRAP project, by its several components, proposes an arrangement bringing together elements that relate to nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, and elements that relate to conventional weapons. In so doing, it can draw on certain agreements that have constrained nuclear and conventional weapons, as well as the biological and the chemical weapons conventions, which outlaw those weapons of mass destruction. But both nuclear weapons and conventional weapons remain in unfortunate abundance. Nuclear weapons are increasing in some states, and many conflicts using conventional weapons are underway as we meet. Accordingly, the SCRAP project has, among other elements, a legally binding treaty that provides a template of how states can bring together measures already agreed among states parties to one or another treaty in such a way that both nuclear and conventional weapons are either prohibited outright or placed on a schedule leading to their elimination. Bearing in mind the statement made part of the arms control canon by General Secretary Gorbachev and President Reagan in speaking of how to proceed, trust but verify, the SCRAP Treaty contains very inspections and use of satellites to ensure that elimination of nuclear weapons and of the great preponderance of conventional weapons would be accomplished in a trustworthy, that is, a verifiable way. The project accordingly has no illusions on reaching agreement on terms that would be less than confidently accepted by the world's nations and peoples. It might be termed, in words used elsewhere in this gathering, an approach to integral disarmament in the promotion of integral security. The celebration of the 50th anniversary of the NPT is a highly appropriate occasion to focus on the obligations undertaken by all the parties to the treaty, not just the nuclear weapon states, to achieve both nuclear disarmament and, in quote, a treaty on general and complete disarmament under strict and effective international control. The SCRAP Treaty provides the basis in today's world for achieving general and complete disarmament under strict and effective international control. It also makes clear that the elements it draws together from existing agreements are not some far-off utopian end, but elements based in reality. It thus is reasonable to devote substantial effort to motivating the international community through the NPT review process and other forums, and bilateral and larger groups of nuclear weapon possessing states to greatly accelerate their efforts. It is not to be expected that we shall wake up someday soon and discover a world free of any weapons save those at the disposal of the United Nations, but it can be the case that a global mobilization of support for much more far-reaching measures can compel governments to address and achieve such measures in an ongoing and evolutionary process with a welcome end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Corden, for your presentation on the SCRAP project. I'm now delighted to pass the floor to our next speaker, Dr. Olamide Samuel, professor at SOAS University, to present the Freeze Weapons campaign of the SCRAP project, which he coordinates. Dr. Samuel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Melinda. Your Eminencies, Your Excellencies, dear friends, the fury of the virus illustrates the folly of war. On this day, exactly a year ago, the UN Secretary General conveyed the words calling for an immediate global ceasefire in all corners of the world, to put armed conflict on lockdown and focus together on the true fight of our lives. In the Easter message of 2020, His Holiness Pope Francis iterated that this is not a time for division, that those who have responsibility in conflicts muster the courage to support the appeal for an immediate global ceasefire. And I quote, "This is not a time for continuing to manufacture and deal in arms, spending vast amounts of money that ought to be used to care for others and save lives." End of quote. Inspired by these words, our small team of academics, researchers, and young volunteers embarked on the Freeze Weapons campaign as a complementary measure to support the calls for a global ceasefire. The scourge of war is only exacerbated by the continued availability of weapons. The rationale behind war is only justified by those who seek to benefit politically or financially. Yet the COVID-19 pandemic illustrated that the greatest threats to our collective security and stability come from not within our long-lasting rivalries and animosities, but in spite of them. Global catastrophic events, climate change, food insecurity, water insecurity, disease X. These are the threats to our individual and collective existence that remain in spite of the horrific preoccupation with war and the threat of war that often characterizes our final resolutions of political differences. The opportunity costs as we turn our collective scientific and political expertise, as we turn our financial and human capital to missiles, bullets, and machetes, is that we turn our attention away from a burning planet, from the development of credible healthcare infrastructure, from water desalination, from a universal vaccine. The inverse correlation between expenditure on militarism and expenditure on healthcare provision has been empirically proven by my team at Freeze Weapons. The question now is, how do we act on this revelation? The Freeze Weapons Initiative identifies the facilitatory role the arms trade plays in the continuation of conflict. Therefore, in the spirit of integral disarmament, we call on all states and corporations, individually and collectively, to take concrete steps towards the cessation of the excessive production, trade, and supply of weapons, to free up the human and financial resources to combat the COVID-19 pandemic in the short and medium term. This will include the implementation of moratoria that will suspend our unhealthy addiction to militarism. It is our hope that the steps taken in this direction will enable a collective reprioritization of our security concerns. And in the long term, it is our hope that our experiences will bring us closer to a heuristic adoption of integral security. So while we welcome the adoption of the UN General Assembly Resolution 74-270, calling for global solidarity to fight the coronavirus disease, and while we welcome the UN Security Council Resolutions 2532 and 2565, calling for ceasefire in conflict zones to allow the delivery of COVID vaccines, we also call on the international community to dig deeper, to focus on a significant source of violence, and to stop the legal and illegal proliferation of weapons as a complementary measure to the suspension of conflicts. We call on the international community to adopt the Freeze Weapons formal text that has been circulated. We cannot silence the guns while remaining silent about the guns. Recalling the words of the Holy Father, as conveyed today by His Eminence Cardinal Parolin, we must transform instruments of hatred into instruments of peace, and we must reject the increasing proliferation of arms. This is crucial if we are to accept the promotion of the common good, and if we are to promote integral human development. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Samuel, for your presentation. Our next speaker is a vital member of the Security Task Force and an old friend of the dicastery, Ms. Susie Snyder. Ms. Snyder is a member of the ICANN International Steering Group and PAX Netherlands, where she is the coordinator of Don't Bank on the Bomb. Ms. Snyder will share with us the importance of these projects on how to create synergies between the different civil society movements working on disarmament. Welcome, Susie.
Thank you so much. It is a great pleasure to be here with you today and to celebrate on this panel the Fratelli Tutti and his great thoughts and ideas for bringing true security. Value comes from the good work we build up and honor in our society, not the goods we consume or invest in. And we need to reorient towards measuring wealth by the way we lift one another up, not solely the balance in our bank accounts. And while we work towards that, we can build up norms and practices so those bank balances can also help us to build a common good in the meantime. I've been looking at questions related to the role of the financial sector and the production of weapons for nearly a decade as I coordinate the Don't Bank on the Bomb project. And this project is a collaboration between PAX and the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. What we're doing is working with the financial sector to encourage companies that are involved in producing nuclear weapons to shift out of that business, especially now that nuclear weapons are prohibited under international law. We also build up the global stigma against nuclear weapons by encouraging the financial sector to adopt policies that limit or prohibit investments in these bombs, and we publish all of that information. PAX is also really involved in the Stop Explosive Investments campaign. And that's part of the international campaign to abolish landmines and the Cluster Munition Coalition. And through working with the financial sector, we've helped stop the production of cluster bombs. Companies like Textron, Lockheed Martin, Orbital ATK, even though they are US companies, and even though the US didn't join the Convention on Cluster Munitions, these weapons producers cited pressure from the financial sector as a contributing factor to ending their production of prohibited weapons. Now, I want to be clear, they didn't stop because the US asked them to stop. They didn't stop because it was law. They stopped because the work they were doing was prohibited elsewhere, and financial institutions refused to invest in them any longer. They stopped because of the stigma. In fact, the Trump administration asked Orbital ATK to start making cluster bombs again. But Orbital ATK came back and said, pressure from activists, states, and NGOs is leading to divestment from companies with revenue tied to cluster munition production and development. And because many of the banks identified in public naming and shaming campaigns are American, the US is bound to feel the brunt of this pressure. Continuing to rely on cluster munitions exposes the US military to international backlash. We can see when the weapons producers themselves say that the naming and shaming of banks who invest in them make it impossible to keep making weapons, we're onto something. It's a winning strategy. And so now it's time to apply that to other weapon systems. Similar action to this is taking place around firearms. Organizations like Everytown for Gun Safety have brought together institutional investors with trillions in assets to say they will no longer provide capital to the big retail gun distributors. They have demanded that the sporting goods industry make it much more difficult for Americans in particular to walk into a store and walk out with an assault rifle. They're using financial wealth as a tool to shape society, and we can continue to do the same with other weapons production. Our experiences show that working with the financial sector as allies in creating change can work. But to do so effectively, we have to be really clear and really direct. I have a lot of conversations with banks, with pension funds, with asset managers, and they all talk about controversial weapons. They brand them in this special category. And I would argue that maybe every weapon is controversial. Every weapon should illustrate a controversy in our priority. What do we want, bread or bullets? But that's not the metric that's used by the financial sector. So we have to speak their language and moving ahead with these programs. And so they talk about controversial weapons as those that are illegal or known to cause indiscriminate harm, that are designed to hurt civilians. And no financial institution wants the bad publicity that comes with being known as an investor in something designed to destroy cities. So what we're doing is we're having these conversations and building up understanding of what controversial weapons are, of how all weapons bring controversy. And as weapons become illegal, like nuclear weapons have been since the beginning of this year, we are putting pressure on the financial sector, both working with them and pressuring them to make the companies that are building these bombs stop. This builds up a norm around what is acceptable and what is not. But these things don't happen magically. They're not just created out of thin air, and they're built by conversations. They're built by our actions, like our conversation here today, talking about weapons and how we can end weapons. Social change movements, like the International Campaign to Abolish Weapons, ICAN, or like the ICBL, the CMC, like Code Pink's Divest from the War Machine campaign, or As You Sow's efforts working to redirect all investments away from the defense sector. They're making progress through grassroots education and advocacy. People have a space and an opportunity to get involved, because anyone with a bank account can make a difference. And this is leading to additional pressure on weapons manufacturers, to shareholder resolutions at their annual meetings, and to demonstrations on their doorsteps. These are all contributing to the norms necessary to end reliance on tools of violence and oppression and shift to what's needed for the well-being and common humanity of our human family. Because wealth is a powerful tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. We know that one of the pathways to delegitimizing unacceptable weapons is through partnerships with those whose mission it is to generate more wealth. And together, we can build and sustain the norms that make these weapons illegitimate, unacceptable, to eradicate them for good, and to focus on rebuilding from this pandemic in a world with less weapons profiteering. As we do this, we build hope, we build fraternity, and we build peace. And that is the truest metric of wealth of all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susie, for your very concrete presentation. Now, I'm extremely honored to introduce our next speaker, Reverend Father Jean-Marc Rajolison, who will give us a regional perspective on disarmament from the African continent. Father Rajolison is a priest of Madagascar and was previously a member of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, a precursor to this dicastery. Father Rajolison will speak to the urgent need for the regulation and disarmament of guns in Africa and the steps that have been taken to silence the guns. Father, the floor is yours.
Good evening to everyone, Eminence, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Cardinal Turkson and his collaborators for inviting me to participate in this panel and to present this topic, silencing the guns, creating conditions for African development. So for this presentation, I have 3 points. The first point is the context. Africa has for decades been the scene of armed conflict resulting in the deaths of thousands of people, including women and children. So, is it good? Is it? So Africa has for decades been the scene of armed conflicts resulting in the deaths of thousands of people, including women and children. The proliferation of weapons in the continent does not 60s and 1970s, when several wars like that of Biafra were raging, followed by wars of liberation dictated by the geopolitical logic of the Cold War. In fact, armed conflicts in Africa result from the entanglement of several factors: cultural, social, political, military, geopolitical. In addition, Africa is coveted by other countries because of the wealth of its subsoil. Being aware of the danger posed by the proliferation of weapons, the heads of state and government gathered in 2013 to celebrate the Golden Jubilee of the African Union wished to express in their declaration their determination to achieve the objective of an Africa without conflict, to make peace a reality for all populations, and to rid the continent of wars, and to commit to ending all wars by 2020. It is therefore to achieve this objective that they adopted at their assembly held in Addis Ababa in July 2019, the theme of the year 2020, silencing the guns, creating conditions for the development of Africa. Second point, initiatives taken by the AU, African Union. First, there was the adoption of a master roadmap by the Peace and Security Council of African Union. Then, an awareness campaign was carried out among young people, women, and actors working in the field of socio-economic development. African Union is also working together with the United Nations to achieve the goal of silencing the guns. Thus, the international community, through Resolution 2467 in 2019 of the United Nations Security Council, underlined the importance of the two joint UN and the EU partnership frameworks to galvanize the concrete and the practical support of the system and of the Commission to help Africa make tangible progress towards its goal of creating a conflict-free continent. Finally, African Union was asking of the collaboration of the Church, which exerts a significant influence on the populations in Africa. Third point, SECAM's commitment to peace. Concerning these topics, silencing the guns, SECAM issued a declaration on the occasion of the African Union Summit held in Addis Ababa on February 9 and 10, 2020. In this declaration, SECAM, led by the Cardinal Ouedraogo, who represented SECAM in the summit, SECAM calls upon the heads of state to make some efforts for the disarmament in Africa and to promote the culture of dialogue in order to avoid the violence in the continent. Another statement is also issued about the COVID-19 in May 2021, highlighting the importance of the solidarity in these difficult times and the setting up of the modern health system in Africa and the creation of a special fund for the development, as it is said in the encyclical letter Populorum Progressio. Furthermore, this year, the Cardinal sent a message. Cardinal Philippe Ouedraogo, President of SECAM, sent a message to the political leaders in Africa, and especially to the main actors in the conflicts affecting Tigray in Ethiopia, urging the weapons and to implement the process of dialogue and reconciliation in view of the establishment of lasting peace in this region. Following the recommendations of our Vice President, Bishop Sipuka, who is the president, at the same time, the president of the Justice, Peace and Development Commission, this commission is expected to strengthen the relations of SECAM with the African Union through its activities, in which the priorities are focused on peace building, education for democracy, good governance, the defense of human rights, and the preservation of the environment in the light of the social teaching of the Church, and in particular, that of Pope Francis in Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti. If the Silencing the Guns project remains a long-term objective, SECAM wants to contribute to it through the activities of the GPDC Commission, Justice, Peace and Development Commission, in order to create a conducive environment to development in the African continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father, for your presentation. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Greet van der Schot, Secretary General of Pax Christi International. She will describe the crucial role of education in building sustainable peace, especially considering the challenges of delivering education in conflict zones and unstable regions. Ms. van der Schut, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm very grateful to have an opportunity to participate in this important webinar. Thank you so much. Peace education is essential to disarmament. Pax Christi members strongly believe that ordinary people trained in active nonviolence and imbued with positive values can help disarm the world. From local communities where small arms are the weapons of mass destruction, to international relations where powerful and sophisticated weapons, including nuclear weapons, are consuming at a scandalous rate financial and human resources, which could instead be used to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Essential to successful disarmament is the engagement of every sector of every society, including political decision makers, religious leaders, parents, teachers, business leaders, and most especially youth. So peace education is an extremely important dimension of parenting, of religious formation, of formal and informal education, from early childhood on, and of lifelong learning. Let me give you a few examples. The Pax Christi Great Lakes Network is comprised of 20 member organizations in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Burundi. There, our multi-year peace education program works with youth directly affected by violent conflict, educating young people about the culture of peace and active nonviolence, empowering them to become nonviolent change makers in their own community, and helping them to earn a living through small joint income generating activities. Now, in addition to learning about effective methods of nonviolent action, participants also looked at the inner, liberating, and transformative life force of nonviolence to tackle injustices and violence in their societies. We have now about 80 participants, young participants in the program, who are replicating in their local communities and often living in violent situations. They're replicating the trainings on conflict prevention, nonviolent communication, and as well as trauma healing. Pax Christi in Germany, who is working with Miserior, is opening more space for peace education in schools so that pupils are empowered and encouraged to make independent contributions to peace and disarmament. Students learn about the effectiveness of nonviolent, in comparison to violent, campaigns for political change, about the concept of rethinking security, and about the post-World War II Europe Peace Project. In geography, they study globalization with a view to global supply chain and interdependencies. Educating young people about the danger of nuclear weapons and about the climate consequences of war and preparations for war is crucial. A few years ago, Pax, our member in the Netherlands, organized a nuclear disarmament crash course for students who were chosen to join the Pax team at the NPT conference in Geneva. The Catholic Peace Building Network is also working to empower a new generation of Catholics to contribute to the elimination of nuclear weapons by hosting seminars for university students on nuclear disarmament. Our member in the Philippines, Miriam College, brings Catholic students from Greater Manila and Muslim students from Mindanao together on a regular basis, and at times to advocate for peace and disarmament with members of the parliament and government officials. And as a result of their work and that of other civil society members, the government of the Philippines has recently ratified the Nuclear Weapons Ban Treaty. We are very pleased that the United Nations has also underscored the importance of young people's contribution to disarmament and sustaining peace by establishing the Youth for Disarmament Initiative. Young people from around the world will receive training in the general principles of disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control through online courses and a 2-week in-person study tour in Vienna, Geneva, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki. They will exchange ideas with disarmament experts from think tanks, civil society organizations, and diplomats. And they will develop a plan to engage their own communities on issues related to disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control. Education for peace and nonviolence shapes virtues and values. It forms conscience, it builds character and courage. It expands horizons and imparts practical skills for transforming conflict, interrupting violence, communicating nonviolently, and building positive relationships. Given the reality of violence, including extreme violence in our broken world, the call is urgent for an immediate and long-term commitment to disarmament. And the contribution of peace education to that cause cannot be overestimated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Funneschot, for your presentation. Before concluding the second section, I would like to share a brief note regarding our dicastery's own efforts to connect peace and education processes. I would like to thank the architect Mario Cucinella and his team, who are currently following this conference via Zoom. In collaboration with Mario Cucinella Architects, our dicastery is developing several initiatives on art and fraternity. As the Security and Ecology Task Forces of the Vatican COVID-19 Commission, these projects include the Laudato Si Living Chapels conceived by our architect Julian Reeve, the first of which is here in Rome at the Orto Botanico, and the second in Veneto, created by the Cucinella team. We look forward to moving this project into an ecumenical and interreligious dimension in collaboration with them. Thank you. It is now my honor to give the floor to His Excellency Archbishop Ivan Yurkovich for the closing remarks of the second panel. Archbishop Yurkovich comes to us from Geneva, where he has served as permanent observer of the Holy See to the United Nations since 2016. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored and happy to join this session and bring some points of view from Geneva perspective. I'm certainly thanking everybody saying so many inspiring thoughts today, and I am also happy to greet my colleagues in Geneva who are following this webinar on the web. It is so fortunate that we are having this webinar from the Holy See's Human Development of Ministry. There is no human development with war. There is only a human development which can continue develops in peace. And I think it's really, I come to say, it's a sacred temple of the thought of the Holy See on peace and on the action against the disarmament. The Holy See is convinced, and we do this continuously and persistently, and that any juridical agreement, any legal architecture of disarmament is better than not having juridical support for our action. The Holy See stays behind and defends any treaty promotion that is bringing human security and disarmament to a more objective and more realistic basis. And I think this is going to be our future, and the Holy Father, with his visibility, is certainly contributing enormously. The Holy Father also wanted to have a special view, how to say, taking peace as also from the academical point of view. We need peace as a part of our studies. We should dedicate to the theme of peace and to the reflection on peace our best minds, because anything else, what we do without peace, what we do for the future of human being is destroyed by a simple short war of 1 week, 3 days. We had always shorter wars in the past. one more thing that we have to do, we have to say, and we have to be more very much concerned about, is that capacity to kill today is much bigger and will grow in the future. The worst aspect of this capacity, growing capacity, is that the killing can become an automated procedure. We are, as you know, very much active in the battle against lethal autonomous weapon systems that would give in the armed action possibility to have killing without human ethical follow-up. What we see today, and everybody knows that, is absolutely terrifying aspect that practically all development, all new weapons are more weapons against civil population than weapons against military forces. Military can survive almost any attack. The worst thing is that cities which are bombed cannot survive. It's also urgent war. This is our I would say main points, our main convictions in Geneva. I think we have to do, and what we are going to do, and what we heard today, and a conclusion of many words said today, I think it is, we have to do everything that the worst war that human being has ever fought is already behind us. That anything that we are going to face in the future is going to be at least mitigated by a better growing of human conscience, the better conviction of that we are co-responsible and then belong to the same human being, this human family, and that we are, how to say, we are going to be definitely defeated altogether if there is anybody going to win a war which cannot exist. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your conclusion. And now we will open our question and answer session. We've been receiving a great deal of excellent questions, so we thank you for those, but we will likely only have time for a few questions. So I'll address some of those now, and I remind speakers to please keep your responses very brief. Thank you. Our first question is for Ms. Susie Snyder. Susie, if you could address, how do you plan to engage the main arms manufacturers in conversations about disarmament issues, since they are a major source of revenue? Thank you.
It's such a great question. Thank you so much. Here's the thing. These companies, what they want to do is they want to make money. And the best thing that they can do is find new ways to make money. So what we do is we approach them and say, hey, if you want to continue a flow of investment, you can't keep producing weapons that indiscriminately kill. You're going to be blacklisted. You won't be able to generate capital. A lot of the companies that we talk to also do a lot of other things. They're not known as defense contractors. For example, AECOM used to be connected to the US nuclear weapons industry. They're not anymore. They were blacklisted by many financial institutions, and now they're focused on the bigger part of their business, which is infrastructure and heavy industry. Lastly, the production of weapons has left a contaminating legacy around the world. And those with the expertise to clean up the problem are the ones who made it. So there's also a real opportunity to convert the previous source of revenue, the development of destruction, to the provision of ecological services, environmental remediation, and the service of disarmament. Disarmament is not something that happens for free. It also will take revenue, it will take money, and will generate revenue. And that's one of the pathways forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susie. Our next question is for Father Rajolizon, if you don't mind. So this question says, Dear Father, you presented the contribution of the African bishops to the campaign Silencing the Guns. How do you think your action can increase peace building at the local grassroots level, for example, in dioceses across Africa? And how could we start to apply ecumenical and interreligious dialogue at this local level? I've lost Father Germain, so I suppose we will move to the next question, or unless any of the other panelists would like to address, or perhaps Greet, could you mention a little bit more about potentials for grassroots development in local contexts?
Excuse me. Could you please repeat the question?
Can you tell us a little bit more about potential local campaigns, such as the one that you described for education, how they can increase, how we can apply perhaps an interreligious or ecumenical dimension to them?
Well, I think the actual trainings that are, for instance, now happening in the Great Lakes in Africa are somehow already ecumenical. There is definitely no focus on any Catholic implication. Only on Catholic participants. It's as the conflicts are integral to every conflict there in the Great Lakes. We try to reach a larger public, and we try to reach young people with different religious connotations. It is definitely a very open training. We go to different schools. We try to open it up to different teachers, different kinds of violences that are happening, so that at least there is an openness to different kinds of experiences. What we also see is that many of the students who go back in their local communities, of course, go back in their own realities. And these realities are completely different. And together with the local people over there, they try to build up programs to tackle with the reality, the context realities over there. So programs are being adapted to the local violent context. That is really important. It's not only happening in the Great Lakes region, but it's also happening in other contexts, whether it's in Latin America or whether it's in other continents.
Thank you very much, Greet. We have one final question. Apologies that we weren't able to address all the questions, but due to the technical difficulties, we don't want to take away time from the third panel. But so here we have a question that says, and this is to be addressed to all the panelists, if anybody wants to jump in. Do you agree that global health must be prioritized over economic or political goals? Does higher military spending negatively impact health expenditure?
Hi, I'll start talking about this a little bit because I think it's really important that we prioritize health. And the thing is, when we have a healthy society, when we prioritize health, when we prioritize social security, we reduce the possibility for conflict. We reduce the need for military expenditure. And we actually start to address the root causes of conflict, like inequality, access to resources. So prioritizing health, especially now, in the midst of a global pandemic, which has taken untold lives from us. Now we have to build back better. And that means building back our infrastructure, our economy, our healthcare, not our militaries.
Ola, would you like to respond? Thank you.
Yes, just very briefly to build upon the excellent points that Susie has raised. In the Freeze campaign, we actually created this campaign as a response to 14 years of empirical research that actually showed that in over 180 countries as a sample size, a 1% increase in military expenditure actually resulted to a 0.9% direct reduction in healthcare expenditure in developing countries and a 0.63 reduction in healthcare in the developed world. So we do see a direct correlation between the opportunity costs that policymakers routinely face when looking for the budget out of limited resources to increase military expenditure. So it's definitely empirically proven. And I think, as Susie has highlighted, this is something that we must really look into in much more detail, especially now that we're dealing with a global pandemic. Because although we've been able to develop vaccines and bolster some parts of our healthcare infrastructures in different countries to deal with COVID-19, we are still just as unprepared for perhaps the next global pandemic, which is plausible, God forbid, but it's plausible. The next coming decade or so. And so we want to ensure that the healthcare infrastructure in itself is as strong as possible to be able to deal with such a future shock, rather than still investing in bombs and bullets and missiles, which have done nothing to combat the pandemic so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samuel, for your response. And apologies, but we've run out of time for questions, again, due to our technical difficulties. But we thank you very much for all of your engagement and for all of your questions. And we hope that we can continue the conversation out into the following weeks and months after all of the momentum that's been generated here. So thank you. And now, again, we'll take a brief 5-minute break, and we'll meet again shortly for the third session of this event, which is titled Advancing Ecumenical and Interreligious Cooperation for Integral Development. So we'll be right back in about 5 minutes. We'll see you soon.
Good evening and welcome back to the last panel of the event, Advancing Integral Disarmament in Times of Pandemic. This last panel will be dedicated to the theme, Advancing Ecumenical and Interreligious Cooperation for Integral Development. It is my great honor to first offer the floor to His Eminence Cardinal Kurt Koch and His Eminence Cardinal Miguel Ayuso Guixot, respectively Presidents of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity and the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue. We would like to thank both Pontifical Councils for the support they have given to this event from the very beginning. Cardinal Koch, Your Eminence, you have the floor.
Eminences, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ecumenism can seem to be somewhat cut off from the urgent needs of the world. However, the search for the Christian unity is, on the contrary, deeply connected with the mission of the Church to the world. Jesus prayed that his disciples may all be one, so that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. The Second Vatican Council's dogmatic constitution on the Church, Lumen Gentium, famously describes the Church as being like a sacrament, that is a sign, an instrument of unity with God in order to bring about that unity of all creation that God desires. In this idea lies the connection between ecumenism and peace building. Christian divisions obscure the sign that the Church gives to the world and weakens its strength as an instrument of reconciliation in the world. Therefore, our work for the unity of Christians is not confined to healing the Church, but is of vital importance for the healing of the world, which we believe needs the Church witness and ministry. Of course, most of the work of healing divisions between Christians centers on historical theological differences, long-standing questions regarding Christology, questions concerning the understanding of the Church and authority within it, its structuring and ordering, and questions regarding the work of grace and the sacraments. However, moral questions are also a significant area of ecumenical study, and within this peace building and disarmament as an important place. Even though Christians all profess to be followers of the Prince of Peace, it is fair to say that not all Christian communities have the same attitudes toward warfare and the use of arms. In this, the Catholic Church has much it can learn from its ecumenical partners and much it can offer. The ongoing development of Catholic social teaching with regard to just war theory and the deployment of modern weaponry, which we find in Fratelli Tutti, is greatly appreciated by many other Christians. 3 ecumenical documents, 1 completed and 2 currently being prepared for publication, address the question of peace building. In 2003, the international dialogue between the Catholic Church and Mennonite World Conference concluded a document entitled Called to be Peacemakers. Mennonites take their origin from the Radical Reformation in 16th century Europe. These Anabaptist communities suffered violent persecution, particularly during the Peasant War of 1525. However, the Mennonite communities that grow out of this period of conflict developed a strong commitment to non-violence, describing themselves as a peace church that submits to the Prince of Peace, who calls for the way of peace, justice, and non-resistance, and who exemplifies the way of non-violence and reconciliation among all people and for all God's creation. In Called To be peacemakers, Catholics agreed with Mennonites that reconciliation, non-violence, and active peacemaking belong to the heart of the gospel, and that the mission of active non-violent Christian peacemaking to the world reduces the temptation to turn to arms. Secondly, the Methodist Roman Catholic International Commission is currently finalizing a study on the theme of reconciliation entitled God in Christ Reconciling. The document describes how the vocation of the Christian community is both to receive reconciliation as a grace from God and to minister reconciliation through its rites and its mission to the world. This mission, Catholics and Methodists agree, involves peace building. Both traditions continue to reflect upon and develop their teaching with regard to warfare, and in this regard, Fratelli Tutti has been particularly helpful. In the document, Catholics and Methodists agree that their commitment to peace building must include working together to reduce the manufacture and sale of arms. Lastly, the joint working group between the World Council of Churches and the Roman Catholic Church is also currently working on a study document entitled Peace is a Treasure for All. Beginning from a shared conviction that Christians are sent to be agents of healing and reconciliation in the world, the document will ask what is peace, what threatens peace, and what builds peace. With regard to what threatens peace, the document will name militarization, the arms trade, and nuclear proliferation. This joint study is an opportunity to build common ground with other Christians regarding our teaching on peace building and non-violence. Also, the central work of the Pontifical Council for Promotion Christian Unity is the work of theological dialogue. We also promote and encourage the collaboration of Christians at all levels of Christian life. In the Bishop and Christian Unity, the Ecumenica Vademecum published by this Pontifical Council in 2020, peace building is given as an example of one area where Christians can work together and give joint witness. It is to be hoped that the documents that I have briefly discussed will inspire Christians to such cooperation. I began by saying that the work of Christian unity makes the Church a more powerful sign and instrument in bringing about the reconciliation of peoples. However, it is also true that as Christians work together for the cause of peace, the cause of Christian unity is advanced. Thank you so much.
Very much, Your Eminence, for your contribution. Ecumenical dialogue is fundamental for us Christians, and at the same time, we are called to create virtuous links, dialogue, and encounters with other religions, as the Pope emphasized in Fratelli Tutti. Now, Cardinal Ayuso Gixo, you have the floor to present how the Holy See intends to promote interreligious dialogue for peace.
Eminencies, Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends, I thank His Eminence Cardinal Turkson and the Dicastery for promoting integral human development, as well as the strategic concept for the removal of arms and proliferation of the SOAS University of London, for the opportunity to say a few words on the potential contributions of interreligious dialogue to the advancement of integral disarmament. Interreligious dialogue is integral to efforts of disarmament because religion touches the heart of humanity. In dialogue, the authentic human values of our respective religious traditions are revealed, including the common value and goal of peace. When we lay down arms in our personal and social relationships, we create the possibility of just structures and agreements that promote peace. Pope Francis has noted on several occasions that the arms race is based on a culture of fear and suspicion. And the antidote to armament, in fact, is a culture of dialogue that fosters mutual trust among individuals and groups and prompts the common good. Dialogue, and specifically interreligious dialogue, grants a transcendent perspective to this work, reminding us that the goal of disarmament or the cessation of conflict is not simply material prosperity, but genuine human fraternity, freedom, and integral development, including spiritual development. I sincerely hope that religious leaders will take up the call for disarmament by facilitating opportunities for dialogue and reconciliation, by educating youth about peace, and by encouraging their faithful people to raise voices for peace in the public arena. As Pope Francis recently stated to the diplomatic corps last month of February, and I quote, "We feel an ever greater need for peace, a peace that is not only the absence of war, but rather a life rich in meaning, rooted in and lived through personal fulfillment and fraternal sharing with others." End of quotation. As we continue with this important work of proposing strategies to promote disarmament, may we keep in mind the cries of those children, women, and men affected by wars of all types. May the different interventions in this gathering promote concrete actions aimed at curbing armament, so that in the present context of the pandemic, the enormous resources wasted on arms race can be applied to alleviating the circumstances of human desperation that are often the root causes of conflict. Allow my final wish for this webinar to be Pope Francis' appeal, as I quote, "May the clash of arms be silenced. May their spread be curbed here and everywhere. May there be an end to acts of violence and extremism, factions and intolerance." I wish, my dear friends, that this webinar be of great success and bountiful harvest. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cardinal Ayuso Guixot, Cardinal Koch, I thank your eminences for your valuable contributions. I now give the floor to His Eminence Cardinal Tomasi, Special Delegate to the Sovereign Military Hospitaller Order of St. John of Jerusalem, of Rhodes, and of Malta. Cardinal Tomasi will today offer us a reflection on the action of the Order of Malta for Peace and Interreligious Dialogue. Your Eminence, the floor is yours.
Eminences, Excellencies, dear friends. Speaking of the Order of Malta in its activity for peace, I think we can use this institution or this entity as an example of how civil society can be effective in preparing the ground and working directly for peace. There is one additional characteristic that the Order of Malta has, different from most of the ONG that are operating on the ground or in the international context. They are a sovereign entity in a way that they can use diplomatic relations to support their activity. But the strategy of the Order of Malta is above all serving the poor and the sick as a way to create an environment conducive to dialogue and peace. The Order of Malta is a 900 years old organization. It has a sovereign quality to it. It is active with diplomatic relations in over 100 countries. And it focuses on two objectives: the care for the sick and the poor, and the defense of the faith. In their action, they are running over 30 hospitals and medical centers. They are very active in many cities in the periphery of cities, providing food and assistance to people without a home and so forth. In its mission, the Order sees the service to people as the basis for peaceful relations. Pope Francis describes the present situation that is very tense and still have occasional explosion of violence as a third world war fought piecemeal. And in fact, as we look around the globe, there are moments and situations that really are exactly what the Pope describes, a kind of war that is fought on an occasional state-limited or region-limited conflict. Civilians represent 90% of the conflict casualties. And even when people do not die in conflict, they are often forced to leave their homes. One recent example of these days has been the case of northern Ethiopia, where about almost 2 million people were forced to leave their homes and become refugees. Even if the great press does not speak of some of these situations, they exist, and they are exactly what Pope Francis describes as a third world war fought piecemeal. The Order of Malta acts in such a way that it does not discriminate or limit its assistance to people of one religion, Catholic, but they are all serving whoever is in need. Need is the defining basis for their service. The strategy used by the order is that of dialogue. Pope Francis tells us that we need to introduce, to include an ethical dimension or a morality in the economy and in international relations. It is through this effort that the way of peace can be pursued with success. In my view, business ethics failed exactly by going halfway, trying to affect the corrections with a cost-benefit analysis that in turn only commoditized morality. In the light of Pope Francis, how do we break the relativity of business ethics and instead conceptualize the ethics of integrality that include economics and business and international relations? It is through this effort in the practical level of local activity, reaching out to the people in need in the local areas, that peace develops. Structures that create violence and injustice need to be torn down. First, in an era marked by extremism, the solution must come from dialogue. Dialogue is what makes possible the culture of encounter, on which Pope Francis insists in Fratelli Tutti. Dialogue is the basis of the order's mission to build bridges of peace among people and governments. To do that, the order attaches particular importance to ecumenical and interreligious communication and dialogue. Indeed, it has been acknowledged that in crisis situations, the most trusted and reliable first respondents are often faith-based organizations. And the Order of Malta is right there with an effective presence in moments of disaster and conflict. The style that the Order of Malta follows is the one of Pope Francis in the example he gave, for example, in the recent visit to Iraq. In Lebanon, the Order of Malta serves Muslim and Christians alike. And it's interesting that the trucks or the vans with the cross are allowed to go into very majority Muslim neighborhoods, and they are accepted as friends because of the type of service that the order provides, so that a peaceful relationship can be built among groups of different ethnic and religious backgrounds if there is this goodwill of service without conditions. It is important also to promote integral ecology that increases the relationship of friendship among these groups. And finally, a third element that is very necessary is the promotion of disarmament, in the sense that the arms race feeds a logic of fear and mistrust, while disarmament agreements and efforts to disarm, to promote disarmament, create trust and foster cooperation between states and between groups. This kind of cooperation opens up concrete possibilities of living together without differences. And the example of the Order of Malta can be an indication that groups of the civil society can be effective in today's international relations by acting in this non-partisan way and serving the people in need. This kind of approach raises some important questions that need to be answered. How will we frame and explain the practical necessity for morality to be integral to the economy and international relations, not simply as in the past, as a corrective of the situation, but in a new and compelling way as a core criteria of relations. And finally, in the light of Pope Francis' teaching, how do we break the relativity of business ethics to instead conceptualize the ethics of integrality that include economics, businesses, and relations among groups and states? It is this kind of example that the Order of Malta offers, and it can be followed by other entities of the civil society.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence, for your intervention. Now, we would like to share with you some video contribution from representatives of other Christian and religious traditions. First, we will hear from Christian representatives who will testify to the importance we all attach to the message contained in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Christian representatives include His Excellency Archbishop Barsamian, His Grace Archbishop Cottrell, and Reverend Dr. Jong Chun Park.
The mission of this convocation is both timely and urgent. The calamity caused by the pandemic has been unfolding in the background of continuing wars and armed conflicts around the world, where largely innocent people are the victims of destructive armaments. Rather than making and using weapons to kill people, we need to demand from world leaders to protect lives and work for peace. As St. Paul in his letter to the Romans tells, we need to lay aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Christ blessed peacemakers, calling them children of God. God is creator, maker of a world that contains everything human beings need to flourish. And so, as God's peacemaker children, we are tasked with creating a world in which all people have access to what God created for their benefit. His Holiness Pope Francis, during his visit to Armenia in 2016, made the following remarks during an ecumenical prayer vigil for peace. His Holiness said, "Memory infused with love becomes capable of setting out on new and unexpected paths, where designs of hatred become projects of reconciliation, where hope arises for better future for everyone, where blessed are the peacemakers." Together with our efforts, there must also go hand in hand heartfelt prayer and intercession for those individuals, peoples, and governments who continue to succumb to the temptation to restore to force, who continue to take the easy path of harming others rather than working together with them to secure a peaceful, fruitful, common future. This kind of prayer is not natural to us. It is not easy, especially not for those whose lives and peace have been shattered by violence. But the Armenian Church has long believed that this kind of prayer is the cornerstone of peace. Our people's heroic fidelity to the Gospels through almost countless events of violence is proof of the Armenian Church's deep and abiding commitment to peace. Every day at Vespers, our faithful pray that God will remember in His mercy not only our parents, our teachers, our brethren, our benefactors, but also those who do us evil, our enemies, and those who hate us. The 10th century Armenian monk, St. Gregory of Narek, doctor of the Universal Church and doctor of peace, said in his 83rd prayer, "Remember, Lord, those of the human race who are our enemies, as well, and for their benefit, grant them pardon and mercy. Do not destroy those who persecute me, but reform them. Root out the vile ways of this world and plant the good in me and in them. Will we live to see our mission of disarmament and peace accomplished? Perhaps by the grace of God we shall. And even if we do not, may we be remembered as the pioneers who, by our labors and our prayers, laid the foundation of the peace that future generations will enjoy.
Your Eminences and distinguished colleagues, I bring you greetings from the Archbishop of Canterbury and your sisters and brothers in the Church of England and the Anglican Communion. Among Christian people, it is well known that the 6th of August, the day the first nuclear bomb was dropped on the people of Hiroshima, is also the Feast of the Transfiguration, that day when the Church remembers Jesus' glory, his true identity revealed in dazzling brilliance. The irony of this is not lost on Christian people, for these two events, held together by the same calendar date, present humanity with a choice. Which blinding, dazzling light will we follow? Will we allow ourselves to be seduced by those who tell us that an ever-escalating and ever more sophisticated arsenal of the most terrifyingly destructive weapons will secure our peace? Or will we see in Christ another way? For Christ is the one who asks us to turn the other cheek, walk the extra mile, give without thought of receiving back, and who says that if your enemy is thirsty, you should give him a drink, not a bomb. His teaching about peace, and particularly in the Beatitudes, his teaching that those who are peacemakers are children of God, and that those who hunger and thirst for what is right will be satisfied, resonates in the hearts of all people of all faiths and all people of goodwill. His teaching rebukes the complacent and the powerful. He shows us that the peace we long for cannot be found whilst we know that someone's finger is still on the trigger, for so-called deterrence only works if we remain determined to fire. Consequently, the churches of the Anglican Communion join with the Roman Catholic Church and other churches in the World Council of Churches in opposing nuclear weapons. The Anglican Consultative Council, at its meeting in Hong Kong in 2019, reconfirmed this opposition, particularly lamenting the lack of justice for those nations who had been most impacted by the testing of nuclear weapons. The General Synod of the Church of England passed a motion in 2018 calling upon all Christians to work tirelessly for a world without nuclear weapons and welcoming the 2017 United Nations Treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. Also, we called on our own government to respond positively to this treaty by reiterating its obligations under Article 6 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Sadly, only this week, that plea has been ignored as the United Kingdom government has made the dangerously retrograde step of deciding to increase its nuclear arsenal by 40%. We also committed ourselves to work with ecumenical partners in addressing those issues which drive other nations to want to possess nuclear weapons, and therefore to work together towards achieving a genuine peace through their elimination. Hence, it is an honor to be addressing this gathering and to stand alongside the witness for peace offered by the Holy Father in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti. We also believe that the best way of building security and stability in our world is to invest in each other, increasing international aid and serving the common good. For we know that Christ's call to love our neighbor shows that we belong to each other. We are one humanity inhabiting one world my well-being, and the well-being of my neighbor, and the well-being of the planet belong together. As Christians, we hold on to this vision of peace that is so much more than the silence after the guns have finished firing, and more than the standoff before they had started. Our scriptures tell us that on God's holy mountain, in God's kingdom of justice and peace, swords are turned into plowshares, and that peace requires reconciliation, painfully embraced, and justice for every nation. Jesus asks us to be peacemakers. This will bring us into conflict with the vested interests, principalities, and powers of the world. We therefore need to stand together in our witness to peace. We need to discover our prophetic voice. We need to understand that in the eyes of the world, a peacemaker will very often look like a troublemaker. That's what Ahab called Elijah. It is what the world will call us.
Greetings in the name of Christ. I am J.C. Park, President of the World Methodist Council. In the midst of the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, we are facing the ominous symptoms of the rise of new Cold War. The recent Quad, which is the quadrilateral security dialogue of Australia, India, Japan, and the United States. The Quad leaders' joint statement, The Spirit of Quad, clarifies their commitment to the complete denuclearization of North Korea. Notice the change of expression from the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula in the 2018 Singapore Summit joint statement of Chairman Kim and President Trump. Besides growing tensions between the US and China, the relation of North and South Korea has not escaped stalemate. The World Methodist Council, along with the Korean Methodist Church and the United Methodist Church, has been working for the Roundtable for Peace on the Korean Peninsula since 2017. The Atlanta Statement of the Roundtable 2018 declares, quote, "We are still standing on the crossroads between the choosing the God of life or choosing the nuclear idol of death," unquote. However, in new Cold War, North Korea must feel the risk of having nuclear weapons is more tolerable than the risk of not having them. And South Korea facing growing uncertainty about viability of its alliance with the US will assess the possibility of alternative security arrangements, including regarding the nuclear program. I would like to appeal to restore the spirit of the six-party talk as the 2016 Seoul Theological Declaration of the Korean Methodist Church states, quote, "The clouds of distrust that are overshadowing the Korean Peninsula bring about the nuclear crisis. We reaffirm September 19 joint statement of 2005, which addresses the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and peace treaty as the most realistic and comprehensive towards Northeast Asia's denuclearization and peace settlement. The 6 countries of North and South Korea, United States, China, Japan, and Russia participated and agreed upon the September 19 joint statement," unquote. The spirit of the six-party talk makes us aware that the overcoming of the threat of nuclear weapons is a problem of full international cooperation, a matter of the organization of power in the comprehensive international system. it imperatively requires and invites us to relearn Jesus' peacemaking politics of love. According to the founder of Methodism, Reverend John Wesley, quote, "In the full extent of the word, a peacemaker is one that, as he hath opportunity, doth good unto all men, one that being filled with the love of God and of all mankind, cannot confine the expressions of it to his own family or friends or acquaintance or party, or to those of his own opinions, no, nor those who are partakers of like precious faith, but steps over all these narrow bounds, that he may do good to every man, that he may someday, some way or other, manifest his love to neighbors and strangers, friends and enemies," unquote. Finally, let me share with you the former US ambassador to South Korea and 2019 recipient of the World Methodist Peace Award, Reverend Dr. James T. Laney's remark, quote, "Peacemaking begins when we stop demonizing and stop being skeptical and distrustful, no matter how bad the past has been. It begins with humility and the attitude of hearts. Peace is only possible when more people have this attitude from their pews to presidents and leaders. While there is reason to be distrustful, the fact is that peacemaking is not a witness to the good of peace. Peacemaking is the actual activity of making peace happen," unquote. May God bless peacemakers. Amen.
We thank each speaker for their important messages. And now we would like to share with you some video contributions from representatives of other religions on the role of religions and interreligious dialogue in shaping a new paradigm of security. We thank for their messages Rabbi Joshua Arens, Dr. Mohammad Samak, Ms. Ella Gandhi, Professor Dr. Gita Dharampal, Dr. Nirja Gupta, Reverend Dr. Yoshinori Shinohara, Ms. Roshani Shenaz, Mr. Rajiv Jayan Shah, and Mr. Kamaljit Singh Ahluwalia.
Every religion as far as I know, has the goal of peace, prosperity, and security of all mankind. This is certainly the basis of Judaism and Christianity. We all will encounter the other. And the question is, what shall be our relation to the other? The Bible we Jews and Christians share is quite clear. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. This is reflected in Leviticus in the Jewish scriptures, but also in what you call the New Testament, where Jesus explains that the love of God and the love of the other is central. In Psalm 119, it says, "I am a friend of all who fear you." And the rabbinic literature demands that I have to reach out to the other, to seek, to pursue shalom. Shalom, which is often translated as peace, is more than that. It also means harmony, wholeness, prosperity, and tranquility. Religion is not the source of conflict, as often perceived, but the solution. The Abraham Accords, the peace treaty between the Gulf states and Israel, have recently shown how much interreligious dialogue can be fruitful where secular political solutions seem almost impossible. It is probably the first diplomatic accord in which specifically Abraham, a religious figure, is mentioned. And it shows that there is a bridge between Muslims and Jews beyond political or social affiliations. Religion is something that automatically connects people of religion. We as religious people can build the bridge and the bridges between peoples and cultures. The borders today are not between Jews, Christians, and Muslims, but between people of good faith and goodwill on the one hand, and those who don't share this credo on the other hand. We can and shall provide encounter and learn and teach about the other and open the doors for a true shalom.
Good morning, dear esteemed scholars, ladies and gentlemen. As we all know, weapons production is directly connected to weapons consumption. Weapons consumption is also directly connected to wars and conflicts. Wars and conflicts are the ultimate consequences of hatred. Hatred is the expression of unfairly solutions to problems between states or between peoples. Political sciences tell us that most of today's conflicts are not new. They are old, but unjustly settled. Weapons-producing countries are the same countries who dominate the world order. They influence conflicts and sell their weapons, and then they solve conflicts when the market is saturated or even or over weaponized. But the solutions are made not to be permanent. They are made to be unjust. Unjust solutions are intentionally made and imposed when the conflicting sides are not able anymore to pay for their weapons. Later, when they become able again, they will be encouraged to reconsider the unjust settlement by force. So they turn again to weapons. Consuming new weapons leads to producing more. And so the vicious circle goes on and on. That's why it is said that better to have a just war than unjust peace. But is there really a just war? The fact is that the only alternative to coexistence is co-destruction. And in the long run, all wars are lost. So also, all the money spent on weapons is lost. Look at us now. We put on face masks to protect ourselves and others from a virus we cannot see. But what about all those other unseen viruses we need to protect ourselves from? How will we deal with the hidden pandemics of this world, the pandemics of hunger and violence, climate change, and atomic weapons? If we are to come out of this crisis less selfish than when we went in, we have to let ourselves be touched by others' pain. There is a line in Friedrich Hölderlin, Patmos, that speaks to us about how the danger that threatens in a crisis is never total. There is always a way out. He says, where the danger is, also grows the saving power. That's the genius in the human story. There is always a way to escape destruction. Where humankind has to act is precisely there. In the threat itself, that's where the door opens. In order not to lose lives and money, the pandemic proved to us, as His Holiness Pope Francis said in his message, Fratelli Tutti, we humans are one family, sailing in one boat. Either we sink and drown together, or we find our way to a safe shores together. But this Holy Father, Pope Francis, enlightened by the Holy Spirit, humanity has a chance to rebuild its brotherhood, fraternity. And this is clearly twinkling in Fratelli Tutti that is delivered by His Holiness. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to this very important and timely conference, when the need for spiritual guidance is of utmost importance. The past year has revealed even more sharply the inequality that exists in our world. It has become starkly apparent through the COVID-19 pandemic that our destinies are linked and barriers created by society are crumbling as we begin to realize how vulnerable our life is, how interdependent we are, and how little the value of wealth is in our struggle for good health and happiness. As we suffer under lockdown conditions, the millions of workers engaged in providing essential services have now assumed greater significance. More importantly, is the realization that their vulnerability is as acute as ours. Meeting the Sustainable Development Goals is now more pressing than ever before as the COVID-19 pandemic sweeps through every corner of our fragile planet. Hunger, homelessness, and lack of access to the basic necessities of life need to be addressed urgently, not just for the good of those suffering, but also for the good of us all. In all of this, we see very acutely the need to maintain peace and stop all war and violence. The trillions of dollars spent on the manufacture, sale, and distribution of arms and ammunition, and on the invention of weapons of mass destruction, can instead be used to successfully transform the lives of millions of people living in poverty. Wars have resulted not only in deaths of thousands around the world, but also in the flight of millions from situations of war to seek asylum in other countries, increasing the number of refugees in the world. Gandhiji's life was spent in trying to build a culture of nonviolence. Nonviolence does not just mean the absence of violence, but it is a way of life. Gandhiji wrote, and I quote, "We have to make truth and nonviolence matters, not for mere individual practice, but for practice by groups, communities, and nations." I close quote. 3 important ways in which we can make a difference are: 1, breaking down barriers and respecting all God's children, regardless of gender, class, caste, race, status, and any other societal barriers. 2, building a community on egalitarian principles and breaking down the polarization of communities between the super wealthy and the starkly poor. To achieve greater equality or equity, Gandhiji suggested a trusteeship model, which entails the voluntary acceptance of responsibility by those who have accumulated a lot of wealth to utilize their wealth in the interest of the marginalized and deprived, and to support and enhance their lives. This model is similar to the economy of solidarity, which His Holiness refers to. 3, a clear focus on true practice of our faiths. Through this, we can build a culture of compassion, love, and responsibility towards others, towards animals, and towards our environment. If we achieve this, there will be no place for greed, hatred, anger, and armaments. There will be place for peaceful negotiations. There will be place for caring and sharing, and there will be place for love and cherishing. To achieve this, let us all come together and support the Arms Freeze campaign now.
The COVID-19 pandemic has created an unprecedented situation globally, but this extraordinary crisis also conceals an incredible opportunity, yet wrapped within a tremendous challenge, namely to rebuild a better nuclear weapons-free world. But this can only succeed if there is solidarity and unity, not only between nation states, but also between world religions, so that together we can transform this global disaster into a nursery of cooperation and empathy. During the enforced lockdown that for me metamorphosed into a meditation retreat of spiritual renewal, I realized how Hinduism constitutes a lived religious philosophy, underscoring firstly, the sacredness of all life, with all living species in our biodiversity embodying a divine spark, and secondly, the underlying oneness of all beings. This implies, logically, that all forms of life are to be loved and revered, and therefore the practice of ahimsa, or non-violence, is held to be sacrosanct. Notably, ahimsa signifies not just physical non-violence, but means more extensively avoiding any harm, whether physical, mental, or emotional. Ideally, ahimsa also implies the renunciation of any form of domination over other beings. In short, the paramount importance in all Indic religions given to ahimsa can greatly contribute towards world peace. Delving deeper, ahimsa is paired with satya, truth, derived from sat, signifying an existential and unifying foundation of all that lives. As such, ahimsa not only represents a force greater than violence, but also connotes that self-sacrifice is preferable to the sacrifice of others. Another dimension is ahimsa's faithful consort, karuna, meaning compassion. Karuna is considered an inherent quality in all human beings. Because of the underlying oneness of all beings, karuna is extended to others, not just out of love, but because it is an entirely logical thing to do. As a direct antidote to cruelty, and indeed as a psycho-spiritual vaccine against the coronavirus, karuna can help to eliminate callousness and indifference to the woes of others, and yet being selfless compassion, karuna expects nothing in return, not even gratitude. In a nutshell, the exemplification of karuna, satya, and ahimsa in thought and deed would not only help us to retrieve the sacred in modern times, but also enable India to redeem herself in the eyes of the world, thanks to her civilizational wisdom. in line with a verse from the Rig Veda, which exhorts us to come together, talk together, let our minds be in harmony, perfect be the union among us. Let us, in mutuality and fellowship, eschewing polarization, appeal to the humanity of all nation states to tackle our shared moral task so that discord can metamorphose into a transformative and cooperative new paradigm. Our ultimate goal, through interreligious dialogue, laying down weapons of the mind and the heart, would be to advance integral universal disarmament, to rid the globe of nuclear weapons, not only because they cause catastrophic harm that even affects future generations, but also because they are totally obsolete and unable to meet today's challenges. And instead, we should create a global fund from the astronomical nuclear expenditure to be used infinitely more viably for health, education, and the fight against climate change, and thereby ensure human and environmental security and well-being globally. To conclude, Hinduism, together with other world religions, provides us with a moral compass to help us navigate our way away from cataclysmic disaster to shape a new paradigm in order to realize a more humane and sustainable future for our planet Earth. Thank you.
Advancing integral disarmament in times of pandemic. Adonai, Most Reverend His Holiness, Acharyas and Gurus, and humble namaste to all. Absence of war is not peace. To ensure peace, harmony is important, and significantly, harmony comes when all essences are in symphony. To create harmony, dissolving the self is needed to create an array of emotional rainbow. The statement might sound dreamy. At the same time, this is the base of integral humanity. This dream that man, society, nation, and the world dissolve their egos and come together as a single race to promote the idea of unison or ekatmata. However, history in continuation with the present times has proved that this is not easy, that the world, which resides in contours of religions, powers, economies, systems, and societies, shall echo similar sentiments is under doubt. That everyone shall keep human at the center and then take a stand is suspicious. That powerful countries shall use power to protect and not to scare the less powerful nations. What should then be the prognosis? That human race must stand at the brink of war forever? That wars may change their shapes and nature anytime? That from armaments to chemical biological wars, a human heart must always fear death and destruction? And while the world had been so very engaged in all these situations at one side and fighting with poverty, illness, hunger, illiteracy, abuse to the nature and planet, and scarcity of basic human needs, and was constantly involved in spending large amount on becoming armed nation by spending more than capacitated budget on the entire world came to a standstill. And what a standstill! Total lockdown, stopping entire race with equitable emotions was perhaps this example in entire world history. Pandemic brought everything to a closer. It resonated dissolution, despair, helplessness, danger, and the need for togetherness, cooperation, innovation, and care in the same breath. If not now, then when integral humanism will be louder heard? Today, world is witnessing a new order where divided boundaries are joining hands. Many factors have brought the leveling effects. This is the right time to revisit concerns in integral manner raising oneself above religions, power, economies, and armed status. Post-pandemic equations are opportunities to give a timely message to strategists to rise above, to go back to human instincts of love, care, and compassion. A timely theme has been brought by Vatican COVID-19 Commission, and pandemic must serve the clarion call to respond to advanced need of integral humanism through disarmament. A web-based connect has given a way to reverberate together. Suspicions on absence of physical presence has led to virtual concentrations, which is termed as Atmic connection, the soul connection in Indian philosophy. Thinkers and practitioners such as Mahatma Gandhi, Swami Vivekanand, Lala Lajpat Rai, Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay, and many other practicing philosophers have echoed what is given in Vedas on integral humanism. Om Sahnavaktu Sahnav Bhanaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahe Tejasvinavadhimat Sastu Mavid Vishavahe. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Meaning, may He protect us together, may He nourish us together, may we work conjointly with great energy, may our study be vigorous and effective, may we not mutually dispute or hate, let there be peace in me, let there be peace in my environment, let there be peace in the forces that act on me. Dhanyavad. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Yoshinori Shinohara. I'm Secretary General of Religions for Peace Japan. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the organizers of this online event, especially Vatican and the Source Channel for hosting this significant event. I think this is a very timely meeting as under the coronavirus disaster, the idea of integral disarmament is really needed globally. I also would like to thank you for inviting me to deliver online speech on the role of religions and interreligious dialogue in shaping a new paradigm of security. Religions for Peace has been working on various peace issues as a coalition of religions since 1970. The main reasons for its founding 50 years ago was its mission to abolish nuclear weapons altogether. This photo was taken at the time of founding. Since then, we have been conducting advocacy activities for disarmament to the United Nations and the governments, and educating citizens and the youth generation about the importance of abolition of nuclear weapons. In particular, as the only country to have experienced explosion of atomic bomb, Religions for Peace Japan has been working for many years on this matter. Today, COVID-19 is causing economic stagnation and political stalemate globally. Self-centeredness is spreading. International division and economic disparity are deepening, and global mutual distrust is increasing. In this situation, as a coalition of religious organizations, Religions for Peace Japan strongly advocate two things when considering the new security paradigm. The first is the rejection of the theory of deterrence by the military. Possessing weapons may be justified because it can deter and suppress military attacks from other countries. In particular, the reason why nuclear weapons have not been eliminated is because of this idea of deterrence. The essence of this deterrence theory is it is based on distrust between human beings, which is an intimidation, threats, and suspicions. Such a relationship of suspicions and distrust will only increase mutual hatred and the danger of war. I believe the most urgent task is to create international environments that eliminate distrust. We as religious people do not adhere to the theory of deterrence, but call for international cooperation by building trust and credibility. The second is to reduce military spending and redirect that budget to addressing COVID-19. All countries are likely to face difficulties in securing financial resources for social security and medical expenses. For example, in the US, the country with the highest number of infections and deaths due to COVID-19, if $35 billion US budget for nuclear weapons, which promotes the innovation of nuclear weapons, is replaced with medical expenses, 300,000 intensive care unit beds and 35,000 artificial respirators could be provided, and the salaries of 150,000 nurses and 75,000 doctors could be covered. Thus, the concept of integral disarmament is required to reduce military spending and use the money to pay for medical care. In solidarity with you, Religions for Peace Japan will continue to strengthen advocacy to governments and awareness-raising activities for citizens in order to further promote an integral disarmament in the time of COVID-19. Thank you very much for your attention.
Namaste. I am extremely honored and blessed to be a part of this very critical for our times webinar, hosted and organized by the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development in collaboration with SCRAP, in support of the call for a global ceasefire by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and in response to the third encyclical of His Holiness Pope Francis, Fratelli Tutti, All Brothers, that is subtitled on fraternity and social friendship. I would also like to thank His Eminence Cardinal Peter Turkson, as well as His Eminence Cardinal Miguel Ayuso and the Pontifical Council for the Interreligious Dialogue for facilitating this session. We have not inherited this planet from our ancestors. We have borrowed it from our future generations. And anything that is borrowed needs to be returned with interest while paying back the principal as is. And here we are, left, right, and center, robbing our present and future generations of their very birthright to a healthy, harmonious, and happy planet. We all bow down to something or someone. The tragedy is when we bow down to destructive forces of power, ego, and control. This is not happening for the first time, but it is in our hands to make sure that it is happening for the last time in the cycle of human history. My birth religion, Zoroastrianism, stands on the three pillars, which are good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. These three simple, beautiful tenets, which in different words are the true essence of world religions, faiths, and spiritual learning. Yet, it seems most difficult to achieve because we are constantly running after instant gratifications of what is in it for me and crossing the sacred thresholds of self-preservation. My beloved God Master Avatar Meher Baba said in 1942 on the subject of the need for creative leadership, we can never have any vigorous world culture by merely piling together certain isolated elements selected from the present diversity of culture. That way, we shall only succeed in getting a patchwork of little vitality. A hodgepodge of collected ideas can never be a substitute for a direct and fresh perception of the goal. The new world culture will have to emerge from an integral vision of the truth. In order to appreciate truth, approach it through itself, without any game of hide and seek. As world change makers, we have to delete this noise and stop playing hide and seek with the integral truth of life. We must urge our larger family of human siblings to engage in meaningful dialogue and contribute our voices to implement this global ceasefire. We must, through our individual socio-spiritual responsibility, invite all on the influencing hot seat of life to commit to tangible, actionable steps towards general and complete disarmament that is integral to human development and soul evolution. Also, as the Director of Unity in Diversity World Civil Society and the Golden Door Ambassador for Truth and Integrity, I echo Pope John XXIII, that it is vital that people lay down the weapons of their minds and awaken their heart to find peace, to bring this much needed societal change and concord to the world. We shall then be able to realign our focus and funds from weaponry to the true needs of food, healthcare, education, and a healthy environment of dignified labor. Let us not be just, focus on this webinar and the agenda being so today. It is imperative that more than ever before now, we move towards conscious spiritual leadership that operates from this divine standpoint to create a new paradigm of oneness and secured living through inner disarmament by deleting our disparaging software of hatred, discrimination, and separations, and thus elevate humanity to higher grounds of progress, abundance, and oneness. We as spiritual leaders and influencers, guides, must stand ready to chaperone each one along the way. With every freedom comes greater responsibility, and with every responsibility comes greater accountability for us to rise and show up for this call of life, paving the way for the new humanity. Signing off with a namaste, which means the God within me bows down to the God within you. The consciousness within me bows down to the consciousness within you. Stay blessed. Victory to humanity.
Jai Jinendra. I'm Rajiv Shah and representing One Jain UK. Global military spending keeps on increasing every year. It was around $1 trillion at the turn of the century to almost $2 trillion in 2020. Despite financial and economic crisis, nations are not curbing arms production. Cold War may have ended, however, regional, national, ethnic wars are continuing. Shouldn't wars be something that our children read in history books? Yet they are rampant across the globe. Violence and terrorism has taken a heavy toll on innocent lives and fostered a climate of fear, hostility, hatred, mistrust, discrimination, exploitation, and intolerance. Isn't it an irony that the focus of this conference is about the threat to human existence in the future, not because of natural calamities, but because of the threat of weapons of destruction? Technological and scientific progress at the expense of moral and ethical values has resulted in stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction. United Nations was formed to foster global peace, but it too has to resort to armed forces. Time has come for thinking about non-violent methods. Ahimsa, non-violence, is one of the 5 fundamental tenets of the Jain philosophy, which provides a holistic approach to inculcate a transformation in the minds of humans to live in harmony, keeping in mind that all life is independent and interdependent. In Uttara Sutra, one of the Jain scriptures, it states that a monk cannot be called a monk by change of attire, but by a change of attitude. On the same note, nations cannot get prominence by dominance, but by reverence for all life. For Jains, Ahimsa extends to all life forms and is a way of life to coexist with nature. Lord Mahavir, who was the last prophet for the Jains, observed, character, vows, virtues, and knowledge are meaningless unless non-violence and reverence for life is enshrined in our hearts. Violence cannot be killed. Its spirit has to be extinguished from the hearts and minds of human beings, which will lead to compassion, charity, and care for all. In Acharan Sutra, another Jain scripture, an analogy is given. One warrior may conquer 1,000,000 enemies in war, compared to a person who conquers their soul. Between these two victors, the real victory is one who conquers their self, implying victory over one's anger, ego, deceit, and greed is the greatest of all victories. Universal self-preservation underpins the Jain philosophy. Every single soul, be it that of animal, plant, or human, seeks happiness, and no one likes suffering. Just as a rose emits fragrance to the one who plucks it, we all need to foster the feeling of forgiveness to one another. The fruits of forgiveness is fraternity amongst all, which will alleviate the utility of weapons. Forgiveness is encapsulated in a wonderful Jain prayer. I forgive all souls. May all souls forgive me. I have enmity with all and animosity with none. What is evident before us is that violence cannot be eradicated by violence. And on the contrary, it aggravates it. Therefore, humanity needs to develop a mindset that ahimsa alone is the savior of this strife-born, terror-inflicted, and environmentally polluted world of ours. This mindset will lead to non-violent words and deeds. Dr. N.P. Jain was a former Indian ambassador to the United Nations, said, "Time has come to assert the courage of ahimsa, non-violence, and to reinforce spirituality underpinning the global efforts to fight and overcome violence and terrorism." He further adds, "The search for durable peace must be built not on weapons of mass destruction, but on the foundation of heightened spiritual vitality and mutual confidence inspired by love, compassion, service, and faith." As Martin Luther King said, the choice is not between violence and non-violence, but between violence and non-existence. Mahatma Gandhi, in his favorite prayer, echoes, "For one and only one thing I long, to free living beings from their agony and pain, to wipe away their tears." Acharya Channaji, a Jain spiritual guru, eloquently states, "Ahimsa is a true and unconditional surrender of our own identity for the welfare of others." It is not a mere principle of any particular religion. It is in consonance with the true nature of all living beings. Along the same veins, the eminent Acharya Mahapragya mentioned that to establish peace, humans should move away from the direction of conflict and instead strive towards interdependence. The Jain trinity of ahimsa, non-violence, aparigraha, non-possessiveness, and anekantvad, multiplicity of viewpoints, is indeed the solution to eradicate the weapons of mass destruction. This will manifest tolerance, coexistence, compassion, empathy, sympathy, kindness, and forgiveness. This is the only sustainable roadmap for a harmonious world. Time has come for us all to think of our collective future, a future that sustains us and our future generations. We need to transform our thoughts, actions, and deeds through sound education and morality, resulting in transformation of greed into contentment, hate with tolerance, and killing with reverence for all life. Emperor Ashok said, "Victories of peace are far more enduring than victories of war." If we stop the arm race, we can use our arms to embrace each other and race towards a peaceful world. Thank you.
Good day to all. My name is K.S. Ahluwalia from India, and it's a privilege for me to be in the company of thinkers, doers, who are steadfast in creating a better world for us all, each time, every time. My 2 cents on the caption topic are as follows. Nature gave us all one planet to exist and bloom, brighter each time, every time. Yet amusingly, we humans, the most evolved ones, choose to charter a path of distinction, difference, fragmentation, annihilations, where I, me, and mine, my way or the highway, I am the only solo player, became our friends, philosophers, and guides. Let's give ourselves the right due. Yes, we are continuously making progress to make this world a better place to live in for us all. We've created mammoth, gigantic buildings kissing the sky. We're exploring the mysteries, finding answers. We are traveling to other planets to find traces of life there, and we are making ourselves more, yet more powerful, such that we eliminate any disconnect, any dissent, any argument confronting us. What's the result? We are witnessing with disdain, impunity, indifference, mostly the large-scale pollution across spectrum in each and every sphere: water, air, land, flora, fauna. We have ever-increasing greenhouse emissions, expansion of the carbon footprint, piling of chemical weapons of mass destruction, nuclear arsenal, each adding additional brick to annihilation of the life from this planet. So what do we do next now? We have come now to the crossroads of our existence, and internally, all of us, yes, we know what is the right path, yet we choose not to take it because it's damn hard, very hard, and extremely hard. It's now time for us to go back to our roots so as to correct the imbalance in our thinking, as our present thought patterns are not helping us, leading us to a construct anymore. Treating the branches or effecting symptomatic treatment heals never. It never had, never shall, and never will. Hence, Getting back to our basics, our edifice, our roots, to search, explore, analyze, and then crystallize what we ought to do and what we are doing now is the new watchword for us. And what's our base? Our base is nature, which is godliness, divinity, ethos, value compass, ethics, consciousness, our evolution base. They are not standalone, good sounding words. They are concepts that redefine, refine the way we think, do, and be. They are the guiding principles that urge us to take the right path, even if it's hard, effective course correction, even if it's painful. Let's now dwell what the Sikh ethos shares solutions to these challenges. Like other intense streams of wisdom, Sikh ethos asserts the following in loud, clear, and ambiguous terms. First, establishing just, equitable, respectful, and evolving unison between man and nature, where they complement each other, supplement each other, work alongside with each other, never substitute each other, a collaborative commitment till eternity. Secondly, giving space to others first and thus creating space for yourself is being sensitive to mutual needs by providing, nurturing continuously a vibrant ecosystem. Guru, inferring the realized one who is respected, is affixed for water, air, land, signifying that they are divinity personified and not object, mundane, available resources. Hence, one needs to be wise in gratitude, humbleness while using them. Imbibing the change values comprising of pragmatism, equality, justice, adaptability, courage, forgiveness, dynamism, moderation, freedom, openness, discipline, solidarity, commonality, unity, and devotion are the other key concepts that need to be imbibed during all times, most so in integral disarmaments in terms of pandemic. Sikh ethos stresses imbibing the concept of utopia for realists, of constructing a society with visionary ideas that are in fact wholly implementable and measurable. Lastly, Sikh ethos encourages us all to ask questions. Edifice being, change your questions to change your life. Keep asking and exploring to find a construct better, such that one achieves absolute fulfillment in life. There are no religions, no beliefs, no dogmas that exist. What exists for all of us is connectedness without boundaries, mutual respect, cohesion, working alongside with each other, inculcating meaningful conversations without aiming or defeating, where we work as one. We are all part of one, each correlating and immersing with each other. Let's keep it simple. We owe it to ourselves first and then others. Let's be responsible and accountable in the now while being a rational optimist. These are my 2 cents on the role of religions and interreligious dialogues in shaping up a new paradigm of security. Your call now, folks. Thank you.
Once again, we would like to sincerely thank each and every one of the speakers. I now wish to pass the floor back to Dr. Pecorario for the conclusion of the event. Thank you very much for the opportunity to assist with moderation.
No, thank you, Eloisa. Thank you, Melinda, and thank you, Elena. In an in-person conference, that would be the moment for your applause, because you really deserve all our gratitude for your extraordinary support. I wish to thank you in particular, all who have followed us so far with enthusiasm and patience. And I would like to thank in particular the young people who has followed us from any corner of the world. I wish also to thank all our partners and staff at the Dicastery who have assisted with the technology and the media required for this webinar. Apology for the difficulties we have suffered at the beginning, but we hope that we have compensated that with professionalism, and be assured that the event has been recorded. All the material will be available on our website. And as has been already said, this is just the follow-up of a process started in the past, and we will continue. So we invite you to stay connected with our project and program. Now, to conclude our event, I would like to give the floor to our last speaker, Monsignor Bruno Marie Dufay, Secretary of the Dicastery, of our Dicastery. and for some concluding remarks and a final prayer for peace. Thank you so much.
My dear friends, I'm not sure that we can conclude after all these remarks, this contribution, very interesting contribution. And I would like first to thank again all the persons who participated to this webinar. It's always a very difficult exercise to have some concluding remarks. I would prefer to propose some proposing remarks to go on very humbly and very simply this reflection about peace, promotion of peace today, disarmament, and the contribution of the religion and the dialogue between religions in this perspective. 4 points, very quickly, very briefly, very clearly, I hope. First, I would like to say that we are in a very special context today between anxiousness and hope, great anxiousness and great hope. Because of the experience of the pandemics, because of this experience of vulnerability and fragility of our health, of our bodies, of our humanity, but at the same time, with this rediscovering to take care. And I would like to say that we have many peacemakers, but one of the most precious peacemakers today are the medical teams, doctors, medical teams, hospitals, and so on, because they received this vulnerability, this fragility. We also have the experience of the fragility of our institutions at the same time, of our political institution, international institution also. And perhaps it's very important to consider this challenge. I think it's the greatest challenge today, to give courage and to give strength to the leaders, political leaders, and actors in the international institutions, to reinforce and to give a new dynamism to the international law, because we cannot build peace without rights and without international law and without a new consideration of international treaties and contracts. That's my first point. I would like to make a transition to say, what is to contribute to peace today? And what is to contribute to disarmament today? First is to listen and to analyze the situation. And we have to say that we have many complicated situations, many complicated conflicts. I think at this moment of the situation in Ethiopia, for example, how can we understand this situation? In Africa, in Yemen, how can we understand this situation? The situation of the process of peace in Colombia, how can we understand that? It's very complicated, so we have to analyze, to understand, to listen all the actors, all the communities, to see the possibilities to support these actors for peace, to dialogue and to act. And to act, that's to say, to decide. And that's the other challenge, to decide to support peace proposition, peace proposals for a new consideration of the life together. So it's clear that after this first point, that we have to clarify a concept, a very difficult concept we have in all the dialogue, in all the discussion about peace, is the concept of security.
What do we mean when we use this concept of security? And what is security? Security is to close or to open. In the time being, we close borders, we close many doors because we are afraid in front of the future and in front of new situation. Security is to continue to produce weapons and arms or to stop. Many political leaders say we have to go on producing arms and weapons. What is security? To share our knowledge or to keep our knowledge, our scientific knowledge for our community. That's the question with the vaccines. So, in the name of security, we go on producing arms and we justify this production as and sometimes as an economic priority. In the name of security, we close our border and refuse people to be with us, economic actors. In the name of security, we are afraid to meet other cultures, other religions, other ethics. In this context, with this central concept of security, I propose, it's a proposing remark, to pass from security to protection. Is different. What does it mean to protect? Is first of all to protect the human rights, the rights of everybody, the rights of children, women, men, people. Because if we have this approach with human rights, we pass from integral security or security to protection for food, for health, and for liberty, for freedom. Third point, we understand that we need to think peace and cooperation, and many contributions make the correspondence and the difference between war and development, war and cooperation, war or conflict and dialogue. What does it mean to think peace and cooperation today? To think is to try to understand, to support actors and to support participation, and to offer participation to all the members of a community. But to think is to anticipate, to have a thinking of future. To think peace is to have, as said the Pope Francis, an architecture of peace. That is a way to build something together. Peace is really a political vision. And we have to support this approach, this political approach. But peace is a moral intention. And peace, finally, is a spiritual inspiration. We cannot build, we cannot have an architecture without an inspiration, without an intention, a project, and without a vision. And so we cross on this point the importance of treaties, contracts, alliance, and cooperation between countries and between communities. We cross the value, the central value of hospitality, mutual hospitality. We cross the challenge of health, education for health, and education for the future of life. And we understand that to think peace is to promote concrete action, as said also the Pope Francis. We need an architecture of peace, and we need artisans, we need peacemakers who try to offer peace and to build peace every day. So from this third point, we discovered the importance of support the multilateralism in intention and promotion and project. But we discovered in the context today that multilateralism is first respect of local communities, local groups, local realities, to open local realities to the global reality. Finally, we could say that peace is a consideration of the richness of diversity and pluralism. It's not so easy to say that. Pluralism and complementarity. It's not only fraternity as an idealism. We could have an idea of fraternity, but complementarity is to say, I need you, and perhaps you need me. That's the condition of peace. Peace is a promise, and is also a debate, always a promise and a debate. I give you my promise to build peace with you. Please give me your promise to build peace with me. So peace is a hope. The hope many people today have in their mind, in their heart. But peace is a process, and this is the process I try to found and to open with this concept of promise, concept of fidelity, of understanding, mutual understanding. Finally, and I conclude with that, what is the role of the religion in this challenge? It's clear that all the religions we listened to the testimonies we had. All the religions open the mind, the human mind, to the cosmos, to the other, to God, to the community. It's really interesting to have this approach of opening and of proposing and supporting this consideration, mutual consideration. Many people in the time of this sanitary crisis and ecological crisis and economical crisis and social crisis, many people need to find a moral authority. And the religions are weighted from and in many places, in many institutions, and for many people, many actors in the world. A moral authority. Many people need to link, to try to link development, nature, environment, and community. So we can offer a reflection as a religion and the religion together. Many people need to receive from the other believers what they believe and what they act. So I could say that the mission of the religions today is to support peacemakers because we believe that to say we are not only in the present but in the future, and God, we believe, is speaking to us, to all the peacemakers in the different communities, different religions, and God is always speaking to humanity with and by peacemakers. I believe that. And I would like to conclude with just a reference of the Pope John 23. The Pope John 23, before reading the prayer of the Pope Francis today, but the Pope John 23, in 1963, in a very important text, Pacem in Terris, peace on the earth, peace on the in the people, in the world, said at the number 45, when people discover their rights, their human rights, they discover their duties for the others. Human rights are human duties. It's very interesting. And when they discover their human rights and their human duties, they discover they are members of a community, of a human community. And more they discover that this community is a community with God. Because God is in the center, in the heart of the community, of the human community. And more, we discovered that we are transcendent human being, and we are God. We have God in our heart, in our body, in our life, as we say in the Orthodoxy. So perhaps today, more than in other times in the human history, but perhaps it was the same after the World War. I said that the Bible, in the Deuteronomic text, in front of you, there are two roads, two ways, the way of death and the way of life. Choose the way for life. This text is very important because it's a way to underline the human responsibility, but also the way to support and to encourage peacemakers and hope messengers. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if His Eminence Cardinal Turkson proposed, but he must to go out to receive a group of people. So he proposed, and I think it's really in the way of these concluding remarks, the economical prayer, Christian prayer, which is at the end of Fratelli Tutti, the last text of the Pope Francis of last October. This prayer said, "O God, Trinity of love, from the profound communion of your divine life, pour out upon us a torrent of fraternal love. Grant us the love reflected in the actions of Jesus, in his family of Nazareth, and in the early Christian community. Grant that we Christians may live the gospel, discovering Christ in each human being, recognizing him crucified in the sufferings and the abandoned and forgotten of our world, and rising in each brother or sister who makes a new start. Come, Holy Spirit, show us your beauty, reflected in all the peoples of the earth, so that we may discover anew that all are important, all are necessary, different faces of the one humanity. This humanity that you, God, love so much. Amen.
Thank you, Monsignor Dufay. I think that we can conclude with this beautiful reflection and prayers. Again, thank you all, and good to be with you along these hours together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.